What's up guys, it's Dang here, and I'm here to talk about the ever so popular, surprisingly popular, up-and-coming anime adaptation of Uzumaki, written by the horror manga god himself, Junji. Now, for anyone who isn't familiar with the Uzumaki series, it shouldn't be mistaken by the blonde gutsy ninja that lives in the village hidden in the leaves. Cause god damn it, I made that mistake when I was 11 years old, and quite frankly, I haven't been the same since. But if you're still here after hearing all of that, Uzumaki is a story about Kirie Goshima, a young resident of the small coastal town of Kurozo-cho. While on her way to meet her boyfriend, Shunichi Saito, she notices Shunichi's father staring at a snail shell in an alley. Thinking nothing of it, she continues on her commute, meeting her boyfriend, where she explains the odd behavior. Shunichi, however, has already been aware of this odd behavior and urges for both of them to leave the town as the spirals have begun infecting their home. She rejects this proposal. However, ever since that fateful day, the town of Kurozo-cho has been afflicted by a multitude of grotesque and macabre events that slowly spiral the people of the small town into insanity. Now, with the story and art style in mind, let's talk about the up-and-coming anime and what you should expect from the production and essentially just the background of this production. Now, what Uzumaki fans, and quite frankly, myself, should be excited about is the fact that Production IG, the studio, is actually going to be working on this anime. You know, that tiny studio that's worked on series like Vinland Saga, Attack on Titan, Haikyuu, and Psycho Pass. Those tiny anime. But jokes aside, Production IG is a studio that's pretty well known for their good animation and their good production overall. Because, you know, they quite literally produced one of the most popular animes we've seen in our generation. This is pretty reassuring considering the fact that Production IG is going for an animation style that really deviates from the norm and honestly stylistically could be considered avant-garde, as pretentious as that sounds. From what I can gather from the trailers, they're really trying to hone in on the Junji style by almost literally bringing the manga to life. Every single scene kind of looks like it came straight out of the manga with a little bit of motion and voice acting added in. It's even got that rough paper grain on top of the art, which adds a little bit more of that stylistic touch to the anime and enhances that Junji manga feel. What I'm kind of hoping for from the anime adaptation is the usage of colors to really contrast certain scenes in the manga and to really enhance the gore and body horror elements of the series. I'm thinking along the lines of keeping that black and white aesthetic for the most part, but having certain scenes have like a splash of red or orange here and there to really make the scene pop out a bit more. Next up, we're going to be talking about the background team or the production team of the actual series, and more in specific, we're going to be talking about the director himself, Hiroshi Nagahama, which I personally believe fits the role perfectly well. Now, if you're not familiar with that name or the director's previous works, he's actually the director of the critically acclaimed Mushishi series and the lesser-known series called Aku no Hana. Now, in consideration of both series, in specific Mushishi, the good elements of each show may actually bode pretty well for the animation and the production of Uzumaki. Now, Mushishi is a show that relies on atmosphere, ambiance, and animation, and they all do that incredibly well in the production. Now, considering the fact that Uzumaki is a show or manga series that I personally believe heavily relies on psychological elements, mystery, and body horror, and I mean a lot of body horror, this means that the Mushishi elements that are good can be directly translated into Uzumaki, despite the fact that they're vastly different shows. Mainly due to the fact that the directors are exactly the same. Now, time to talk about possibly the most underrated portion of a staff, which is the audio person or the composer. And quite frankly, for a show like Uzumaki, audio is incredibly important. For a show like Uzumaki, the audio must be on point for the horror to actually stick with the audience. We're talking about the understanding of intense and disturbing ambient noise. We're talking about intense sounds for gore elements, and just the overall understanding of when and where to add a musical score in the first place. In terms of audio, I'm kind of looking for something along the lines of a Mononoke, if you know what I mean. And quite frankly, looking at the audio composer of this series, I'm not too worried, because they somehow got the guy who composed the audio for one of the most critically acclaimed horror movies of this decade, Hereditary, and his name is Colin Stetson. As you can imagine, getting a person that is a specialist in horror music and just good audio in general is pretty good for the Uzumaki series. And quite frankly, from just listening from the trailer, I'm already excited to see more or hear more from this anime. Now, with all of that over, I can ramble on all day about Ito Junji and what you should expect from his previous productions, but quite frankly, I'm not that qualified and I'm not a professional in this sort of field in Ito Junji works. So instead, today I got a special guest, the Ito Junji and horror manga expert, Weeb Sack, to tell you more about what you should just expect in general from the series.
Hello, I'm Weeb Sack, and Dang brought me on today to talk a little bit about the Uzumaki anime and what you should expect going into an anime adaptation of Junji Ito's work. And right out of the gate, we have to mention the absolute flop of the Junji Ito collection, because to my knowledge it was the first Junji Ito anime adaptation. I could be wrong, but it was the first one I watched and it was horrifically terrible. I mean, the art style was just a giant miss. It was kind of like they tried to replicate Junji Ito's style, but it came out as like a knockoff looking thing. It didn't work at all. The voice acting, in my opinion, wasn't there either. You couldn't really hear horror in their voice. They didn't sound scared or anything. They just kind of took it as normal voice acting, and all around it was just a really goofy adaptation of Junji Ito's work. And if you look at the original stories that were picked for the Junji Ito collection, they're all really solid stories, but the anime studio just kind of took it and ran with it and kind of just ran them completely into the ground in like all the worst ways. It did not come out well at all, and unfortunately that's how it was for a while. But recently, Junji Ito Maniac Japanese Tales of the Macabre came out, and it was a lot better than the Junji Ito collection. The art style is getting there. It's still not to Junji Ito's style. It's getting there. It's getting a lot better. The voice acting was still a little off. Same thing with the Junji Ito collection. They didn't really take it as a horror anime. They voiced it like a regular anime. You couldn't really hear it in their voice that, you know, being scared or being in a really messed up situation. You couldn't hear that in their voice. I know it's weird coming from an incredibly monotone person, but like honestly, it just didn't sound like they were scared or sound like they're in this insane situation, which threw me off a little bit. But all around, I would say Junji Ito Maniac was far better than the Junji Ito collection. But now that we have the history of Junji Ito adaptations out of the way, what should you expect out of a new Junji Ito anime adaptation? Well, I mean, horror for one. You know, I said it a million times and I'll say it again. He's the king of manga horror. No one can do it better than him. He's crazy with it. He's amazing, immaculate. I simp over him. It's Junji Ito. He's super cool. His manga is one of a kind and amazing. And honestly, his stories are just really out there in left field somewhere. Really weird stuff, but that's what makes it so great. So keep in mind, you're going to be in for a really weird story. It just weirdness all around, because that is Junji Ito's brand. It's all just weird, kind of creepy, eerie, all things like that. But this is an anime adaptation of Junji Ito's work, so it could be missing some of those things that make Junji Ito's manga great, which is unfortunate, but that is the reality of an anime adaptation. Some things could be missing or added, and honestly, it could just be a giant flop. So my biggest piece of advice is don't get your hopes up too high for this anime. I mean, I have mine up pretty high because this anime looks dope as all hell, but don't get them up too high. Keep your expectations low, and hopefully this new anime will completely exceed your expectations. But yeah, that's it for me. Later.
Special thanks to Weeb Sack once again for helping out with this video and giving us some good insight on the Uzumaki series and anime coming out and Ito Junji's work. I appreciate all your support once again. Like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.